I know, it's confusing. What's the difference between management consulting and advisory? You'll find out by the end of this video. While there is overlap, one way to think about management consulting versus advisory is the following definition. Management consultants deliver solutions to define problems, and oftentimes these problems are problems that a company is dealing with in the short term. For example, let's imagine that an airline is thinking about adding a new route, and they're thinking, well, we have these 5 routes that we're considering, which route would be the best one? And a management consultant will then come in, plot out all the routes, figure out what the revenues, the costs, the profits are, and then based on the company's goals, for example, let's say that they want to maximize profits, make a recommendation about which route they should add. The opposite side of this is the advisory. Advisory usually deals with companies that know they have a problem, but aren't quite sure what that problem exactly is. And it often can be a long-term problem. For example, let's say that the same airline company that hired the management consulting firm to determine its routes also know that they're probably going to have some tax and regulation issues if they expand to a new country. And they're thinking to themselves, let's bring in an advisor to tell us what we don't know. And if you learn better with other examples, I'll give you one more. A couple months ago, I went into the doctor because I was feeling some soreness in my leg, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. And so I went into the doctor, and the doctor looked at my leg, took some x-rays, and basically ran some tests. And what I knew was, for example, my quads already felt sore, and it was likely because I was squatting with too much weight. And he was like, yeah, you're squatting a lot deeper than usual. But he also said, hey, you also have this ankle mobility issue. You probably want to work on this if you're going to add more weight. So you can kind of see here, I knew one of the problems, which was my quad was sore. Well, the doctor said, well, you're just squatting really deep. But also, you're being limited by a bigger risk, which I didn't know, which was my ankle mobility. So you kind of see that the management consultant would have been like, you feel something in your quads, let's figure out what that problem is. And it's your squatting routine. But an advisor will say, well, let's look at the whole picture here. Well, let's like you have some ankle mobility issues. Let's work on that. Here's what I recommend for stretching exercises to work out your ankles before you start squatting. That I wouldn't have known to ask. So similarly, management consulting comes in with a defined problem. Well, versus an advisor will look at problems that the company doesn't even know they have. They know they have some sort of problem, but they don't know what exactly that problem is or how to fix it. So you can see that there are a lot of similarities between advisory and management consultants. In fact, there are 3 similarities I want you to note. First, they bring in external perspective into solving a problem. Second, they don't own the decision or the implementation of the problem. For example, let's say that the management consulting firm says that you need to open a route from Atlanta to Berlin. Well, it's up to the company if they decide to go from Atlanta to Berlin or one of the other routes they might have been exploring. And the advisor might have come in and said, hey, you should probably think about these tax structures for Germany if you're going to open this route from Atlanta to Berlin. But again, the airline will have to decide they're actually going to implement it. The third similarity is that they can make a recommendation, but that's pretty much where it ends. The company has to make a decision if they're actually going to implement and to take it. Similar to, for example, if my doctor told me to do some certain ankle mobility exercises and I have to do those every day I go work out on my legs, I'll tell you, I have not implemented that perfectly as much as I would like. So that goes to show you that they can give me the prescriptions, they can tell me what to do, but it's ultimately up to the company, in this case, me and my health, to take care of that. So now that we know about the similarities, let's talk about the differences. And there are quite a bit of number of differences. First is the certainty of the problem. In management consulting, the problems are often already defined. The company knows the problem it's trying to solve. A management consultant might rephrase the question or solve something that's very similar to it, but oftentimes the company knows they have a certain problem. For example, their revenues are going down. But an advisor will come in often and solve a more ambiguous problem. So for example, the company might say, hey, there's some risk in this market, but we're not sure what the risks are. And the advisor will then point out, because they've done it so many times, what the risks are. The second difference is the engagement length. Management consulting projects oftentimes have a defined length of time. While consulting firms might work with the same company for years or decades, oftentimes they're switching problems. So for example, they might be supporting one certain business unit for 6 months and then switch to another business unit for the next 6 months. Versus an advisory role will last for years and decades and could be on the same problem, but as it evolves. Because for example, if you hire a risk management or a tax advisor, because the legal and tax implications might change year to year or every few years, so you want to continue to have them as part of your advisory team. So advisor teams might continually work with the leadership team at these companies. So their engagements are oftentimes undefined versus a management consulting firm. Third is their approach to the problem. Management consulting firms often bring in frameworks and their experiences from other industries to go in and solve a problem, but advisors can oftentimes work in the same industry with multiple companies within the same industry and work with them, bringing in expertise from the other companies within the same space and just their knowledge. It's a lot more real-world experience as well as results from other clients that they worked with. So now that you know the similarities and differences between management consulting and advisory, when you happen to apply to a firm that offers both services and you have to decide between which service line you want to apply to, you're a lot more informed. But let's actually look at an example. Let's look at Deloitte. Deloitte is one of the many firms that happen to have both Deloitte Consulting and Deloitte Advisory. So let's actually look at what Deloitte defines as the differences. For their management consulting division, for example, Deloitte Consulting defines their work as working with industry partners to provide practical perspective and solutions to today's most pressing challenges. So you can see how this aligns with our definition earlier of management consulting. Now let's look at Deloitte Advisory. On the Deloitte Advisory page, you can kind of say this. In advisory, we do not take a defensive crouch. We move forward, defining the unknowns and framing the issues before you encounter them. This also aligns with what you learned earlier about advisory roles. So you can kind of see here how Deloitte clearly defines what their services are with management consulting and advisory. For example, if you were a CEO of a company and you came to Deloitte and said, hey, I have this problem I want to solve, Deloitte then can point you right into if Deloitte Consulting should be engaged or if Deloitte Advisory should be engaged. Well, now that I know the differences between management consulting and advisory, which service line should I apply to if I'm given the option? Well, there's actually 3 questions I want you to ask if you are applying for a firm that happen to have both advisory and consulting, and you're only allowed to pick one. Question number 1, what do you want to do long term after working at that firm? For example, if you want to work in strategy or an executive role later, management consulting is likely the better path because many management consulting alums end up going into strategy roles, executive roles. I have another video where I outline the exit opportunities. I'll link that in the description. But just to give you an overview here is that if you're looking for more strategic, generalist type roles, you're probably going to want to go into management consulting. The opposite is also true. If there's a particular field of business that you want to enter and the advisory firm would help you open the door, you probably go there. For example, if you know exactly what you want to do, you don't want to be a generalist, but you want to specialize in something, for example, like risk management, you probably want to go to advisory because so many firms in advisory will specialize in 1 or 2 fields. And this gives you early exposure to build up that expertise so that if you exit the industry and enter a particular field, either in-house or another firm, you already have a leg up over everyone else who doesn't have that same experience. So that's the first question to ask. The second question is, how important is work-life balance to you? Well, it can differ between projects. So I want to emphasize here that sometimes management consulting projects are easier than advisory projects, and other times advisory projects are easier than management consulting projects. It varies depending on the project and the client. I see that there's a lot more hours on average and a lot more travel when you're a management consultant versus when you're an advisor. And the third question you want to ask yourself is, in the short term, does compensation matter? Because management consulting firms, compared to their advisory counterparts, even within the same company, tend to pay 30 to 40% more. So if money in the short term does matter to you and that 30 to 40% does matter, then you might want to go management consulting. Again, I would balance between the 3 of them and not just lean to one unless purely you don't care about work-life balance, you don't care about compensation, but you do care about your long-term goals, then focus on that. But overall, take those 3 questions and balance those out. If you do have a chance to apply to only one of the 2, I want to make sure that you make the better decision for your career. All right, so now you know the difference between management consulting and advisory, but I want to do more to help you. If you're applying to a management consulting firm or an advisory firm, actually, if you comment below the name of the firm, and if you're trying to get an interview or pass the interview, I'm going to go ahead and send you some additional resources to help you. All you have to do is hit the name of the firm and where you are and your goal with the firm. So for example, if you're applying to Deloitte Consulting and you want to know how to get the interview, just type in Deloitte Consulting, getting the interview, and then I'll send you a resource. But if you already have an interview, for example, you're already interviewing with 𝗢𝗂𝗂𝗏, you can type in 𝗢𝗂𝗂𝗏 passing the interview, and I'll send you some resources to help you pass those interviews. If you're serious about becoming a management consultant, I'd love to help you. My team and I are former McKinsey, Bain, and BCG recruiters and interviewers who help applicants land interviews, prepare for their assessments, and pass the interviews so that they can land their offers at firms like McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and so many other amazing consulting firms. And for a limited time, you can access this training all for free. In it, we share with you the step-by-step proven process that has helped over 1,000 people land their consulting offers at some of the biggest firms in the world. And all you have to do to access this training is to check out the link below. And the proven method that you're going to learn in this workshop, we've used to help 90% of the people we work with land at least one consulting offer. In fact, many land multiple offers. And we're going to give it to you away for free. All you have to do to gain access to this is to check out the link below. Joining this workshop could put you one step closer to landing your dream consulting offer.